Welcome to our special mini series called Home Truths. We're going to be talking about some common misconceptions in the world of renovating, bust some budget myths, and basically shine a light on how to avoid a stressful renovation. If you're thinking about renovating or about to start, or you're right in the middle of it, this is for you. Did you know that nearly 1 in 10 British couples split during house renovations and 12% of couples consider divorce? It's a pretty grim way to start a podcast, but today we want to talk about something that doesn't get talked about that much, and that's your relationship during renovating. Jane, what would you say are some of the reasons behind these tricky stats?
Well, I think it's renovation is something that encompasses so many different aspects of our lives and brings it together into this very stressful experience. And you think it's about kind of updating your home, but it's also, obviously a lot about money, and there's large amounts of money which are involved, which is quite stressful in itself. And you're doing something that's likely out of your comfort zone and that you've never done before, and everyone reacts differently to that. So,
Mm.
people can become different people under that stressful environment. You're having to find people and trust people that you've never worked with before. And in the midst of that, there's this kind of pressure that, you're missing a trick, or that your neighbors did it better, or that somehow what you're doing isn't kind of the right thing. And then it's also, a lot of it is tied into how we deal with money and what we feel is appropriate to spend money on. But also, you're making a house for your future. So that also brings into play, what is the future? Are you going to
Yeah.
have kids? Is this a house for just you, or is it for a partner, or are your aging parents going to live with you? So there's so many kind of dreams, aspirations. People are often building for this future life, which is maybe idealistic, maybe too idealistic. Maybe we always imagine that idea of doing our house, and then that will be the moment where we invite all our friends around and our life suddenly becomes like perfect and all the toys will have their place to go. So we're bringing so much into this one
Mm.
process, and it just puts your relationship under strain in that process.
But also, I think you've got this landscape where you have this mix of stories that you get from your neighbors, from your friend's auntie, or about all the things that went wrong and all the things,
Mm.
builders going MIA or costs going over, and like I think we're even walking into quite a dark picture already.
Yes. If you're lucky, then everything goes to plan and it will still be stressful because of all the things that we just said. But potentially some things could go pretty badly, and that will obviously put this other layer of stress and strain on a relationship as you try to navigate those difficulties together.
Yeah, I think we're kind of talking like it's this really big melting pot of stuff, and I guess what's interesting is there are kind of common conflicts that emerge, which are around control, around money, around taste, and like you say, also different ways of managing anxiety. But I think you mentioned earlier about two kind of dynamics that you see play out. Do you want to
Mhm.
talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I think architects always joke, don't they, that they are kind of like marriage counselors. That, you're managing that process of two people trying to realize or decide their kind of wishes and wants and needs. So I think over the years, we've seen a lot of different relationships, haven't we, and how they
Yeah.
play out. And I think there's kind of two main dynamics that we see. So the first is the person who's like totally on it in terms of the renovation. They're really the driving force of what's going to happen. They're pushing the project forward, and they have a partner who's in agreement, but maybe taking more of a back seat, who's kind of like, yes, yes, that sounds good, more on the receiving end of the project. And in that dynamic, I guess what can happen is sometimes the person who's being more passive in the process is kind of agreeing and letting the project carry on right up until the point when the contractors give their prices, which is very late in the kind of planning stage, and they're just about to go to site. And at that point, they've suddenly got laser focus, like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
this is happening. this seems like a lot of money, like it's all kind of come to a head. And it's at that point where they decide to properly engage and then go through all the decisions that have already been made, from their partner with their architect or designer and all these things that the other person feels like they've diligently been working hard to sort out. All of a sudden, all that's come under scrutiny and things can get unpicked and unraveled, and they want to make decisions again. And is this the best way? Is there another way of doing it? Surely there's a cheaper way. So it's really hard at that moment for both sides of that picture, isn't it? Because
Yeah,
one
absolutely.
person just feels really overridden, like they've not paid attention all this time and now we're having to talk about it all over again. And for the other person, they're probably just busy and they've not really had their head in it. And that feels very shocking all of a sudden, and to be like, all right, we're going to do this giant thing and I haven't really got my head in the game. So that's one. And that can be quite problematic, can't it?
Yeah, it can unravel a project quite quickly, actually, at a very key moment.
Yeah.
But what would you say is the other
So
dynamic?
the other dynamic is where you have two people who are in it together. Both people are present, they've both got ideas, it's exciting, there's a lot of energy. And then as decisions start to get made, you realize that there's two sets of priorities in the relationship.
Mm,
And quite often this gets played out as one person being a bit frivolous and maybe interested in some kind of aesthetics or kind of key things that they'd like to include. And the other person kind of acts a bit more like holding the purse strings. And it's natural that there would be those two characters in the process. And sometimes they can flip. It's not that
yeah.
one person plays that role all the time. It's like this dynamic that happens. And I think what's difficult about that, especially when you have different ideas, is that one person kind of pretends that they don't have requirements or that their requirements somehow aren't expensive or costly, when actually you both have things that you want and need out of the process. And it can be hard to work out whose ideas get taken forward. And in that situation, you can very much hit loggerheads. And it often comes with style as well. Sometimes someone will take the lead on how things are going to look, and someone else is going to take a lead on how things function. But quite often, those two things, one is deemed more relevant or more necessary than the other, when they're just wishes and wants. And you need to
Yes.
somehow manage who's going to get what they want in the project.
Yeah. Well, I think when is the aesthetic side, it feels unnecessary and often adding costs where you don't necessarily need it. So I think that's the rub as well, isn't it? When it comes down to budgets again.
Yeah. Do you remember the project where there was two halves of the puzzle, and one side of the partnership was thinking that things were quite frivolous or that everything had come back at quite expensive, but then they wanted a sauna? And it was deemed that the sauna was just like the most important thing, but for some reason that wasn't that wasn't considered an extravagance. Do you
That was
remember
a
that?
necessity.
Yeah. But it's just interesting the way that it plays into your dynamics as a relationship, doesn't it? And
Yeah,
really kind
absolutely.
of turns up the volume on things that are already there.
So you might be thinking this is quite grim listening if you've got this far, but we've talked about the dynamics and the issues that maybe people are facing. Are there any strategies that we can talk about towards preventing that relationship breakdown?
Absolutely. We can talk through a few different kind of strategies and tips that we've developed over the years. So the first one is about anxieties and worries. And I think when we used to start with our clients in a project, it's a really key question actually, just to work out what are they worried about in the project ahead of them. And and the answers are varied and different, but it can just bring to the surface some underlying anxieties that will come up in different ways throughout the project. And that might be, for some people, it's that they're going to get, tricked or done over by the professionals that they're working with. That's just a deep-seated kind of worry that somehow they're going to be taken advantage of. For other people, it's just, parting with the sheer amount of money that it's going to take.
Yeah.
For other people, it's just having the extra load of things happening, answering emails, just that kind of admin side, that they're going to be overwhelmed. So if you can actually sit down and just share what each of you is actually worried about, really, when you think deep down, when I think about being nervous about starting this, what is the thing that worries me? It can just help the other person really understand where you're coming from, because
Really?
it will come up in lots of your conversations and decisions, and you will be able to see it in your partner and say, you know what, I know that you're worried that somebody's going to take advantage of us, but actually we could do X, Y, Z to kind of make sure that doesn't happen. It's just really nice to be aware of it, and to kind of play to your strengths, because your worries and anxieties aren't going to be the same. So if
Mm.
one person is really nervous about talking to the contractors and the other person is really worried about the money, you can work out ways to share and divvy that up so that you're both acting to your strengths and supporting each other.
Yeah. And I think that is a really key point, actually, is identifying things that you can do and steps you can take to kind of mitigate those stresses. So if it
Yeah.
is, for example, you've got a bit of a tricky relationship with your neighbor and you're really stressed about renovating and what that's going to do to that situation, maybe you hatch a plan of going round, sitting down with them, talking it through, or offering them, the builder isn't going to start till 9. Like, you can have those conversations, and maybe it's your partner that deals with that side of
Yeah.
things. You can really get into quite a lot of detail of ways to meet those fears head on, which I think is also really helpful.
That's so interesting, isn't it? Because also the person who's worried about the neighbors is going to be the person who's probably has the most anxiety about going around to talk to them.
Yeah.
And the person who's not bothered, it's literally not going to enter their head. We'd be like, why do we need to talk to our neighbors? We're just going to crack on. So without having that conversation, it's no skin off probably one person's nose to go and do that. And it will really make a massive difference to the other person. So you need to get that stuff out in the open, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think what you said about identifying your strengths is also really key, because I think obviously you're both bringing to the table um, your own personality, your own skill set, and just actually talking about the fact that it's a big job, and dividing and conquering is definitely a good strategy. So brainstorming who's good at what. Um, I think what's interesting here is that often, if you are the ideas person, that doesn't seem like a particularly appreciated skill, but it actually is. And if you are the ideas person, being supported and giving them kind of the time and the space to do their thing is is really powerful. And I
Yeah.
think you kind of want to nurture each other's skills. And if someone is like a spreadsheet nerd, like, get them involved in the budget. You can really play to each other's strengths.
Yeah. For that dynamic where there's one person that's maybe more kind of involved or got their head in it than the other, you could devise like, well, how can you contribute? If I signed all the things that we want to do and you research which is the best one, maybe you're really good at reading reviews and getting into the more kind of technical aspects, then that's a good division of labor. That's something that used to come up all the time on the podcast, isn't it? That there's somebody, the ideas person, doesn't get appreciated until it's all done and dusted. And then all
Yeah.
they get is their partner saying, the house is actually really nice, thanks. It's really good. Well done, And it's like, yes, I told you it was going to be good, and I've invested so much into this process. So yeah, I suspect that it might be the ideas person that's listening to our podcast. So you could get your partner to listen to it and just say, look, it's a valid thing. You're adding potentially value to your life and to your home and to your family, or to the value of your house. It shouldn't be estimated, the kind of value that brings.
But I guess it does go both ways, doesn't it? So if you
Yeah.
are the person who is in charge of the budget, like you say, the ideas person can often feel like, oh, you're stopping my creativity, or you're
Yeah.
making it really difficult. But actually, they're also providing a really, really valuable skill in ensuring that you don't end up at the end in kind of financial ruin or
Yes.
difficulty. And like, that is a real reality that you want to avoid. So I think both appreciating each other's skill and what you're bringing to it is kind of what we're trying to get at. I guess.
Yeah, because if you're constantly pulling, you can end up being so polarized because
Mm.
the more one person digs in about the cost, the more the other person's pulling away with the ideas, and you villainize each other when
Yes.
actually to come closer together, the person with the ideas has to show the money person that they're thinking about how much things cost. And you need to just exemplify that to the other person to allow them to not have to be the no person, because that's not nice
Yes.
either, is it? When you're kind of forced into a situation where you can't dream or have any ideas because you just feel like you're having to rein the project in all the time.
That's where the app comes in, isn't it? Because
Yeah,
you can say to the budget person, okay, I really like this idea, and I really like this idea, and I really like this idea. Which
yeah,
one do you like?
yeah,
And the budget person can say, do you know what? Let's put them all in, see how they tally up. And then
yeah.
already, like you say, instead of being polarized, you're kind of becoming side by side,
Mhm.
and you're fixing and solving a problem. Because I think that's the problem when you're coming head to head. It
Yes.
just is like my way or your way.
They all kind of come in at the same level. Like, I want to paint the room peach, or I want to add this like fancy skylight. They're both requests, but they've got different values associated with them. And until you actually work out the cost of what those things are, you can't really weigh one up against the other.
Yeah.
And I think it's doing that process, having a space to kind of be honest that you both have wishes and dreams for the space, putting all of those into the app, and then doing the work to work out, well, how much are each of those things actually going to cost and how much value are they going to bring to us? Because something you want to do, you might suddenly realize, you know what, it's not that important because it's using
Yeah.
up a large amount of our budget and I'm not that bothered. Whereas using a color or painting a room, it will bring me a lot of joy, but it's not a big expense.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say actually about being honest about your goals. Because I think
Yeah.
the goals you have for the project will dictate how you make decisions and also whether you see the renovation as a success or not. And I think some are obvious and others are less so. So I think trying to be honest with yourself and your partner doing the same about what's driving you will really, I guess, give you more understanding about where each other are coming from. But I think to help you with that, I guess we would kind of advise thinking about it as physical goals and personal goals. So maybe physical goals are, creating more room, better comfort, more connection to the garden, less maintenance. And the personal goals are to add value or make money on your house or to use your own creativity or something. Or like you were saying earlier, is it about having your friends around and big dinner parties and things? So I think it's really important to articulate that if you can.
Yeah. Um, it takes a little bit of time to actually work out what your goals are, because I think sometimes we are not honest with ourselves about what it is that we want to achieve.
Mm,
And you're kind of saying to yourself, oh, it's just about having extra space, but you haven't really been honest with yourself about the fact that you would really like a bit of a wow home that, is kind of just a personal kind of folly to do something creative or nice for yourself. And if you can kind of see where each other are coming from, again, it underlies all our decision making throughout the project. And if you can be honest with your partner, then you're kind of like, okay, well, yes, that does fit your goal. Does it? Can we find a place where it fits both our goals?
mm. I think playing into that as well, Jane, is also just identifying existing risks. Because I think
Mm,
whatever you're finding hard in your partnership currently is
yes.
likely to be magnified during the pressure of a renovation. So I think if I hate to say it, but go back to the last time you had a fight and what was
Oh,
that about? And,
yeah.
how are you reacting, both reacting to the stress or what are the cycles that you kind of get stuck in? Because I think we all do, don't we? And they might feel minor and you can feel like you can handle them. But if they are causing kind of meltdowns, like in I don't know, but if
No.
there are cycles that you guys are stuck in currently, it is worth actually just taking some advice on that particular dynamic, even before you start renovating. Because I think you're about to step into that melting pot of stuff. And so actually getting equipped to deal with that would really be helpful.
Yeah. You don't want to turn up the volume on
Yeah.
your existing problems. They'll be easier to tackle before you've been through the gauntlet.
Yeah. I guess the
Mm,
last thing that I wanted to say was that actually it might sound hard after all of what we've just said, but also to enjoy the process.
mm,
So, it is a temporary thing. It won't last forever. And if you can take some time out to make plans and have these conversations, it's really going to pay dividends in your renovation.
yeah. It is a privilege, isn't it? If you're kind of have the ability to make your home what you want it to be, regardless of whether you're on a big budget or a small budget, it's it's improving your life and your home life. And if you can put that work in up front, it is massively going to pay dividends for you
Mm,
both. And hopefully, as we said, get you to what you consider has been a success at the end of the project. Because without identifying that first, you won't know if you feel like it's been a joyful experience or that you got what you wanted out of it. So yeah, be positive and try and make it what you both want it to be.
absolutely. Thanks so much for being with us and stay tuned for next week.